This is the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Shiloh, and Mom and I are at Shiloh National Battlefield. Have you seen the new National Park app? Well, for Shiloh they have a 12-mile road that'll take you on an auto tour. We're gonna start the auto tour. This battlefield tour was a great way to try out the new National Park Service app. Mom and I had some time before the special event that we had scheduled for the 160th anniversary, and we sure did enjoy getting to drive the battlefield. Stop 5 on the battlefield tour is Shiloh Church. We're going to get out and take a look around here.
It's still a current United Methodist Church.
Interesting.
They hold services here every Sunday.
The description from the app. Here stood the Shiloh Meeting House, the log Methodist church that gave the battle its name. After 3 hours of brutal fighting on the morning of April 6th, the Confederates seized the position from William T. Sherman's division, which had been camped along the ridge for 3 weeks. As part of their 160th anniversary, the National Park Rangers are offering tours, and we are going to be taking the tour of the National Cemetery this afternoon.
Obviously during the battle they did not create the cemetery. They have a little bit more important things to do. So after the battle is done, the Union officers are tasked with burying the dead. They are going to bury in all in burial trenches. The Confederates are still there to this day. I'll discuss why they are. But the Union are exactly in the same burial trenches. They're just marked Union, and some of them are known, more of them than what we know now, because these guys served with them. That's key. So they knew to write the names. But do you think they knew people from Alabama, from Florida, from Kentucky, Georgia? No, they don't know those guys. So that's why they're unknown Confederates. So for this part, the National Cemetery is Union. Possibly. I will tell you a difference in here. So this is created in 1866. But does anybody know the first National Cemetery created? No, not Arlington. They are burying in Arlington, but it's not actually set aside for National Cemetery.
Gettysburg?
Gettysburg. And he dedicates that November 19th, 1863. Dedicated a portion of the battlefield for the fallen. And we do have the Gettysburg Address on the inside of the gates there. This is created in 1866, and from what my Googling search did, it is the first federally protected area in the state of Tennessee. I looked at all the other national cemeteries, they all come after this one. So I'm going to call this the first. Sounds good, right? And it comes way before the battlefield. And it sounds odd, right? You're like, well, maybe they should do the battlefield first. No, they're going to do the cemeteries. Because remember, the veterans are still very young in 1866. So they buy the 10 acres here along the banks of the Tennessee River, which you can't see now, but we will get to see in just a few minutes. They'll buy the 10 acres and they start disinterring from the battlefield. And it also along the banks of the Tennessee River. This covers 156 locations, and it's just a portion from Muscle Shoals up to Fort Henry. So that's the span of the Tennessee River that this cemetery will cover. And you'll notice I'm saying cemetery and not graveyard. I did some more Googling, and graveyards are attached to churches. Thankfully though, the government wasn't really fast in putting these up, because they did arrive years before. Thankfully they didn't though. We get these nice pretty gates. Those are going to be added in 1919. The stone wall that you see, the original one would have been added in 1867. They're going to have wooden headstones, so you can imagine how faded those are going to get through the years. Thankfully in 1876 and 1877 they're going to replace those with the granite headstones that you see in there now. So this is the stacked cannonball that represents where the Grant tree would have stood. We do have pictures of the Grant tree. It's a very unique covered ivy tree, but this is where it would have stood. It's got the 3 cannon denote the place. And of course we put the awesome plaque there. Some of these guys, this is James Darby. He was actually a POW. Everybody knows what POW means, right?
Yes.
He's a prisoner of war. Of course he is buried here. He dies a little bit later. But he is from Ohio, so he's one of our prisoner of wars for this. The number, as you see on top, already got a question. This is just how it is in our record book. That's the new numbering system when they put all the granite in and they reorganize this a little bit. The small square ones, because this has a big section of these, those are unknown. A Pinkerton. When you look up in the burial records, it is Amelia Pinkerton. Yes, it's a woman. She joined the 53rd Illinois, not as a soldier. She actually joins as a laundress. For the Union, they had about 4 laundresses per regiment. You had to be a woman of high moral character, and your husband or your son must be in that same regiment. She is in Savannah, Tennessee, and she'll die on April 10th, so she's not actually here in the battlefield, but remember, they dig them up from Savannah to reinter them here. But she does die April 10th of disease. It doesn't denote what disease, just that she died. But I think she's really cool because she's one of the few women buried in here who's a Civil War grave. These two come to a point. Does anybody know what that point means? These are Confederates. I told you it's a Union cemetery, right? Well, their records, when they disinter them from Savannah, they'll move them here. One is from Alabama, one is from Florida. Alabama could have been, because you have some from Alabama who will join the Union. Florida is definitely Confederate, but they were prisoners of war after the battle, and they actually died in Savannah. You'll notice it's the only monument in this national cemetery versus all the headstones. And that is because it's the 9th Illinois. They have the most casualties for the Union Army, about 61%. So they get 2. They're the only regiment in on the entire battlefield that has actually 2 monuments to their troop.
This cemetery was known as Pittsburg Landing National Cemetery, but it was changed to Shiloh National Cemetery in 1889.
So the 16th Wisconsin, these were all found in a burial pit. It does say pit in the burial record. In Spainfield, near where Edward Sachs, who was the first officer killed in the Battle of Shiloh. We have a headstone for him. He is not buried here though. So the 16th Wisconsin were color bearers. Now, the color bearer is your bravest person in your regiment. They have a flag. That's it. They don't have a weapon. They do have color guard around you, so the sergeants are normally the ones who carry the flag. And for these guys, they go down pretty quickly because they're killed. It's easy. You shoot for the flag, right? So they go down, according to the records, within minutes of each other. All in that fighting in Spainfield, which is before Hornet's Nest and Peach Orchard action. This is Spainfield early morning on April 6th that these guys all go down. And they are buried in the burial pit at the edge of Spainfield. The different ones, some of them say 3, some of them say 2. This one says 9. And this is one of the new ones in the 1930s. In 1935 is when they found this grave. On the edge of the park boundaries, they recognized there was enough parts that it was 9 different Union soldiers. Obviously there's not enough to make 9 different graves, so they still bury them together how they were buried after the battle. But there were 9, so they determined that there was enough in there to be 9 different people. And same thing with some of the other ones, 3 and 2. It's just these are the newer of the Civil War. They're found at the edges of park property. Maybe somebody, one of the farmers, tilled up something and called in, recognizing it was going to be probably a Civil War grave. So they'll call them in and they determine. So this is, like I said, the newer, and then you'll get into the other ones. The actual newer section, and then behind y'all, we'll pass by there in a minute, is the newest section in the entire cemetery. Hornet's Nest, yes, they were in the Hornet's Nest. So the 12th Iowa are part of W.H.L. Wallace's division, who is camped up here at the Visitor Center. They are taking part in probably the fiercest fighting at the end of day 1. For most of day 1 on April 6th, it's piecemeal attacks. They're not really feeling the pressure. But once the flanks will pull back out of the Peach Orchard, out of Jones Field, they'll start putting pressure on the center. So these guys actually fought at Donelson. Thomas, him and his brother joined the 12th Iowa. His name is David Henderson. David was injured coming over the breastworks at Fort Donelson, so he has to sit out the first day. He finally gets to the battlefield. You know the person he's going to go search for? He's going to search for his brother, right? He's going to search for Thomas. Unfortunately, Thomas was with his guys along the sunken road and is killed that first day in action. But thankfully, David does survive the entire war. He will become the Speaker of the House for Iowa, so it's his state. And when he becomes Speaker of the House, it's during a very important time because the veterans are starting to get older and they're starting to want to remember where they served, where they fought. He is the one who will push through the legislation that creates Shiloh National Military Park in 1894. Thankfully, David wanted to remember not only his brother, because he could visit this cemetery. He knew where his brother was buried, but he also wanted to remember his brother in arms. So you have the 12th Iowa, and as they're here, it's normally how they were found. They wanted to, and they, of course, you can see, we knew him. And then some of the other ones are unknown that was in the burial pit. And on the wooden headboards, when they're in the trenches, it would write down their names and where they are in the place. So it'd be starting right to left. This person's name, this person's name. Sometimes it would be just a first name, sometimes it would be just a last name, or sometimes it's just letters. So if you looked at some of the headstones, it may have one letter, space, and then maybe another letter. That's all they could read on those wooden headboards by the time they will disinter them. So that's why some of these headstones, as you go through, are just a fragment of a name. That's all we knew by the time that they would dig them up. All right, so behind y'all, if you will look, I told you that's our newer section. Some of the newest graves in here. We have Spanish-American War, we have World War I, World War II, we have Korea, Vietnam, and even the Gulf War. That's the newest as far as wars who are buried in this cemetery. And originally, you had to have died in battle. That's how you got buried in the cemetery. They have changed that, thankfully. You have to honorably have served, been discharged. Obviously, if you still die in battle, you still get buried in the National Cemetery, but now you could be older. And they did this, the Veterans Administration, so that people who had served honorably could be buried with their brother in arms. You know, if you wanted to be buried in one of these national cemeteries or Arlington, you had to, like I said, you had to die in battle. And with the veterans, they're like, hey, I served. Can I not be buried there as well? So they had to create more national cemeteries. There's actually a section for each national cemetery that you could choose for this. So that's one of our that's the newest one down there. And then back behind that section is also some of our new ones. Now, fun fact, if you want to go find it, grave 145, and it's going to be one of these little square ones, is the dismembered arms and legs of the soldiers who were here getting chopped off like after the battlefield. So if you want to go find it, and it is in the Roll of Honor, they actually mark that down on what that is. So it's your arms and legs. Wow. Find it. Do y'all have any questions? Our veterans said no. They fought together, they died together, let them lie together. So they're still in their burial trenches. We have 5 known marked ones. There are more, we just don't know their locations.
That was a really neat tour, and I love getting the rangers' takes on the National Cemetery. Till next time, this is Kay from Happy Trails Hiking. Thanks for watching.